Thank you, Mr. Speakers. Honorable Senator, alongside with my colleague, Senator Housakos, I too rise today to call your attention to pressing issues and immensely grave concern to all humanity. 2 days ago marked the celebration of the 71st anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Unfortunately, 70 years later, we are still reminded of the monumental work that is left for all of us to undertake, as we all are witness to the immeasurable atrocity and gross human rights violations still being perpetrated worldwide. As we are putting forward this motion, I am deeply concerned about the ongoing situations in Hong Kong, with protesters day in and day out tirelessly fighting to keep democracy alive and trying to uphold universal freedoms and human rights in that region, jeopardizing their security and lives for the good of humanity. The Hong Kong protest has been going on for several months now, and as we know, the protest started in response to the government of Hong Kong proposing an extradition bill that would have made it possible for people to be extradited to mainland China to be tried, which would have undermined Hong Kong autonomy and its people's civil liberty. Although the bill has been withdrawn, the protest has now become a commendable fight for the hundreds of thousands courageous and fearless protesters for political freedom, democracy, the rule of law, and human rights, demanding that China cease to infringe on Hong Kong autonomy and its citizens' civil liberty. Unfortunately, this has been met with excessive use of force and escalating brutality by Hong Kong police and officials. Hong Kong police force unscrupulously have resorted to using aggressive methods against protesters, such as shooting at point-blank range, firing rubber bullets, tear gassing, pepper spraying, prosecuting peaceful protesters, arresting on vague charges, not intervening to defend protesters when attacked by pro-Beijing counterparts, and the list goes on. Nonetheless, protesters have not backed down in the face of such oppression and human rights violation. They have fought and are still fighting to uphold fundamental freedoms and basic human rights, to uphold democracy in Hong Kong. As such, we must stand in solidarity with the protesters of Hong Kong and condemn the aggressive and barbarous action of the Hong Kong and the Chinese officials in dealing and trying to suppress Hong Kong autonomy and its citizen liberty. Furthermore, I am extremely and utterly distraught by the ongoing systematic persecution and gross violation of human rights of Uyghur and other Muslim minorities in China, Xinjiang, Uyghur Autonomous Region. I have been known for some time now that the People's Republic of China is persecuting ethnic and ethno-religious minorities, as well as peaceful political protesters and human rights defenders. The first group that immediately come into mind is the Uyghur Muslim. There is also the Buddhist Tibetan, Falun Gong, Falun Dafa, Kazakhs, and many others. En août 2018, le Comité pour l'élimination.
In August of 2018, the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination reported that it had received credible information, according to which up to some 1 million Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities in Xinjiang are held in detention camps. Colleagues, today, some sources are reporting that number to be between 2 to 3 million that are persecuted. This is completely and utterly shocking.
In the Xinjiang region, the exponential intensification of persecution started with the arrival of Chen Guangzhou, who is the Communist Party secretary of the Xinjiang region since August 2016. Chen Guanggu is also the former Communist Party secretary of the Tibet Autonomous Region. It has been reported by Sophie Richardson, China Director of Human Rights Watch, back in January 2017, that the system that has been first developed and put in place in the TAR by Chen Guanggu is the same one that is used and has been used in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region since his arrival. Although he is the mastermind behind the staggering repressive system, it is important to specify that the person who put in place in Xinjiang is Zhu Heilong, since he knew that he had to be done on site, as he knew who to arrest and how to proceed. The system has been developed to persecute and force to assimilation of ethnic and ethno-religious minority who have been targeted as enemy of the Chinese state based solely on their ethno-religious identity. The Uyghurs and other ethnic and ethno-religious minorities are targeted by the mass surveillance that is happening by voice recognition, face scanning, iris scanning, etc., etc. They are being unlawfully detained in those re-education camps, torture, subject to ill-treatment, abused and persecuted, forced to abandon their culture, religion, language, identity. Some of them are even scattered through prison and detention centers in mainland China. To add to these monstrous atrocities, Muslim children are separated from their parents and arbitrarily held in so-called child welfare institutions and high-security boarding school in Xinjiang for thought education, as it has reported in September by New York-based Human Rights Watch. Colleague, after the UN report came out, the People's Republic of China vehemently denied the existence of the camps, saying that there is no arbitrary detention and that the allegations are simply fake news. They deny the existence of such camps right until they awfully changed the law to legalize them. How convenient. Last Monday, it was reported that suddenly all of the Uyghur and ethnic ethno-religious minority that were detained in those camps have graduated, and they are very happy. Beijing then defended its re-education camp in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomy Region, adding that China will continue operating those re-education camps. Colleague, we all know what these camps are all about. They are simply and purely detention indoctrination camps. The sole purpose of their assistance is the rapidly effective assimilation of the ethnic and ethno-religious minority within that region in order to suppress their identity, culture, religion, and languages. As it was reported by Bethany Island Ibrahim Miante from the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists in her article, Exposed, China Operating Manual for Mass Internment and Arrest by Algorithm, the China cables make a significant advance in the world's knowledge about the largest mass internment of an ethnic religious minority since World War II. With the recent leak of those China cables, we now have undisputedly evidence that international community need to bring the People's Republic of China to justice for what China has done. Will the heinous crime stop if we only resort to dialogue and international diplomacy? I very highly doubt it. The detention, the persecution, and forced assimilation of the minority Muslim and other ethnic, ethno-religious minority in Xinjiang has been going on for years now, and it doesn't look like it will stop anytime soon. The harvesting of organs and the persecution of the people that practice Falun Gong has been going on for years now, and it doesn't seem it will stop. L'oppression et la persécution constante des Tibétains.
The oppression and persecution of Tibetans have been ongoing for years as well. And again, it doesn't seem that it will stop. And then there are Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, are two Canadian citizens that have been unlawfully detained for the past year without any access to their lawyers or family members.
Forgotten Canadian detained in China. Hussein Jelin, a Canadian citizen, former Uyghur activist who fled China and came here as the refugees. While on the trip to Uzbekistan, he was arrested and handed over to the Chinese authority. Hussein Jelin has been unjustly imprisoned for 13 years now. 13 years. 13 years of dialogue and international diplomacy. And I could go on like this for hours and hours. Colleagues, these are the things that we know of. Can you only imagine what else we know nothing about? How many more years should we wait before dialogue, international diplomacy bring real results? Time is of the essence, and at some point, dialogue in international diplomacy does not advance the cause. Why should the world tolerate such oppression, injustice, inhumanity, and cruelty? Le temps presse, et à un moment donné,
time is of the essence, and at some point, dialogue and international diplomacy just doesn't advance the cause. Why should the world tolerate such oppression, injustice, inhumanity, and cruelty? As a nation, Canada has been and will always remain a champion in fighting for democracy, freedom, human rights, and the rule of law. These values that we as Canadians hold so dear are deeply embedded in us. They flow in our veins and are part of our DNA. Why should we depart from these values? Why stick our heads in the sand and pretend that these horrendous situations will miraculously disappear with dialogue and international diplomacy, when this has never worked so far?
Parliamentarian cannot stand idle on these issues of grave concern. I repeat the statement from Senator Husakos. He said, "We are either defenders of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law, or we are not." It's time for the government of Canada to take immediate action and stand up to China. Senator Husakos also said, Canada also imposed sanctions against officials from Russia, Venezuela, Myanmar, Sudan, and so on. Why shouldn't these sanctions be imposed against Chinese and Hong Kong officials? Why shouldn't they get a different treatment? There is too much at stake for Canada to continue to be a bystander. At some point, the government of Canada needs to do the right thing. This is the time to do the right thing. It's now or never. We need to call on the government of Canada to impose sanctions against Chinese and Hong Kong officials pursuant to Magnitsky Law, in light of the violation of human rights, a principle of fundamental justice, and the rule of law, in relation to the ongoing protests in Hong Kong and the systematic persecution of minority Muslims in China. And this is what our motion is calling for: imposing sanctions on those who are relentlessly perpetrating gross human rights violations and forcibly and unlawfully detaining human beings in detention camps, C'est exactement ce que notre motion demande.
And this is what our motion is calling for: imposing sanctions on those who are relentlessly perpetrating gross human rights violations and forcibly and unlawfully detaining human beings in detention camps.
Excuse Senator No, my voter Tompe Goulet.
I'm sorry, Senator No, you have no more time.
Agreed, honorable senators.
Hope you will support this extremely important notion. Thank you. Merci.